Boys, girls, babes, welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. A quick reminder, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you have not already done so. We are available across pretty much all major platforms now. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, etc., etc., etc. We really appreciate all of the interest and all of the love that we've been getting lately. We recently hit 2,000 downloads with one of our latest episodes, so that is amazing. And again, thank you all so much for your continued support. Now, we have got a lot to talk about today, starting with the fact that the Caps are absolutely en fuego, lighting the league on fire right now with an NHL best 9-1-1 record over their last 11 games. Yes, 9-1-1, which is incidentally the same number that many Philly fans were calling on Saturday night to report their team once again being assaulted by these Washington Capitals. Yes, get your brooms out, Caps fans, as that is a good old-fashioned sweep in the city of brotherly love over the last week. As the Caps go 3-0-0 at Wells Fargo Center and open up a 9-point lead on the Flyers in the MassMutual East Division. They won all 3 games in regulation as well, which is obviously huge, especially this season. When you're talking about, a pandemic forcing you to play games only within your own division, it's extra huge to not give your opponents points in games where they don't deserve it. So good on the Caps for winning all 3 in regulation. Flyers fans were not happy about it, though. They were not very pleased with their team at all. Really over this past week, as the Caps' first win of the week over the Flyers actually came on the first day that Flyers fans were allowed back into the building to attend the game this season, of course because of the coronavirus pandemic. So first time that Flyers fans were allowed to attend the game. I think they were at about 15% capacity is what was announced. So of course, with the Caps winning that game by a 3-1 score and just generally dominating over the course of the 60 minutes, the Boo Birds, they were out in Philadelphia, like I said, on their first day allowed back in the building. They booed their own team off of the ice at the end of the game. And suddenly everything just felt right. Everything felt normal once again, and nature is healing, y'all. It didn't get any better for Flyers fans after that game either, as like I said, the Caps would win the next 2 in regulation as well, scoring 5 goals in each game too. So Flyers fans were not thrilled. They actually did boo the Flyers off of the ice in all 3 games, so it was glorious. So yeah, things are looking really good for the Caps right now, and not just with their record either, although that's obviously impressive, but also with the old eyeball test, right? With the way that they're playing, the way that they're competing, the way that they're executing. We've talked about it many times on this podcast before, but it was always going to take some time for the players to get acclimated to a new head coach, get acclimated to his system. In a normal season, that's a process that would usually take months. In a pandemic season, it is even more difficult because, of course, it's a shortened training camp. There's no preseason games. There's limited practice days throughout the season because of the compressed schedule as well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on and on in terms of the obstacles that the Caps were facing this season. So we knew it was going to be difficult. We knew it was going to take time, but we were patient, and the boys kept working at it, and now they are truly rolling. Their offense is still top 5 in the NHL, and their defense is much improved from where it was at the start of this season. Todd Reirden, of course, he left behind a lot of bad habits for these guys to break out of, and they are doing a great job of it. In fact, the Caps were in the bottom 5 teams in the entire league in goals against average over the first month of this season. In the last month, however, they are in the top 10 in the same stats. So a lot of that is shot suppression and limiting high danger chances from the opposition as well. They're doing a supreme job of both of those things. So we talked about how well the Caps have been suppressing shots in our last episode last week. Like I said, they've been doing just a tremendous job of it since getting acclimated to Peter Laviolette's system. They started out the season, just as a reminder, I know we talked about it in the last episode, but they started out the season in the first month. They were giving up 32.9 shots against per game, which was the 5th worst rate in the league. Now, however, over this last month, they've limited it to only 26.8 shots against per game, which is the 2nd best mark in the entire NHL over that span. So over the course of a month, essentially, they've jumped from being the 5th worst in the NHL to being the 2nd best. So that is the Peter Laviolette effect. And probably that's a pretty good indicator of why all 3 teams that he's coached, he's taken all 3 of them to the Stanley Cup final. He comes along and he really improves shit. So he gets everyone to buy in. And you can't win 4 rounds in the playoffs without everyone buying in. And for the Caps, we started to see the changes taking hold in a 3-1 win against the Penguins in Pittsburgh back on February 16th. The Caps gave up just 27 shots against in that game. Many of them, you'll remember, were of the low danger variety as well. And therefore, they gave up just the single goal to the Pens in that game. So for the Caps part as well, they fired 42 shots at Tristan Jarry in that game. And obviously, scored 3 goals and won the game. So that game, when you look back now, was really the start of the turning point, right? It was the start of the Caps becoming a juggernaut once again. So that game started the 9-1-1 run, which they are currently on. And like I said, it's not just superficial results. It's quantifiably improved play in all 3 zones on the ice. Another area as well that has been massively improved for the Caps over the last month has been their performance in the faceoff circle. And we talked about that in the last episode as well, so I won't get into it too much here now. You can hear that, like I said, in episode 53 from last week if you want to hear it more in depth. But yeah, essentially they hire Michael Pekka as a player development coach, specifically to work with the centers on their faceoffs. And ever since then, it's been a dramatic improvement in the faceoff dot for the Caps. And so all of these changes that have been implemented by the Caps coaching staff, they're all adding up right now, and it's showing itself in the results. It's showing itself in the way that the Caps play. They're playing confident. They're playing resilient. We know how well they did when they were missing a ton of players earlier this season. They did very well. And now, of course, they're missing top-line forward Tom Wilson due to a 7-game suspension. And they are 4-0-0 so far without him. So they had to play with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen on Thursday night in Philly, as Lars Eller had to go back to Washington to deal with a family matter. Our thoughts go out to him. Hopefully everything's okay. We don't know, what the family matter was, what the issue was there, but hopefully everything is okay. And our thoughts go out to Lars Eller. Continued good thoughts there. So, but yeah, in terms of the Caps, their play on the ice, it didn't matter. The Caps still beat the Flyers 5-3 that night. And on Saturday night, they get Eller back from DC. He was a late add to the lineup after returning from dealing with that family matter. So they dressed 12 forwards and 6 defensemen, but they only ended up having Eller for like 2 or 3 shifts before he had to leave the game with a lower body injury, and he could not return. So the Caps were essentially playing the whole game with only 11 forwards again. But again, it didn't matter as they beat the Flyers in their own barn again. So cue the 3rd round of game-ending boos from the Philly fans in the last week. But yeah, the Caps are playing a really, really good hockey right now, and they were piling up points in the standings because of it. And what I did want to mention as well, for all of the bitching that we all do about the Caps blowing leads in games, and I'm guilty of it too, but just for some perspective here, because I know it feels as if they have been blowing leads lately, right? But really, when you actually dive into it and look at it, they've actually been doing a pretty good job of, we call it bending but not breaking, which is obviously seen in their 9-1-1 record over the last month. But yeah, when you dive a little bit deeper, they're actually 8-0-0 since February 16th in games that they were leading at the time of the second intermission. So they're really not blowing leads, right? They're definitely making it a lot more interesting than it needs to be on most nights in terms of getting the win, but they are getting the win, which in the end, I think we can all agree is the most important thing, right? So let's try to keep some perspective the next time that they turn a 5-2 win into a 5-4 win. It is still a win, people. And a big part of the Caps' run of success recently has also been the fact that a pair of key top 6 wingers them being Alex Ovechkin and Jakub Vrana. They've really been heating up recently, and that comes at a good time for the Caps, as obviously another key top six winger, Tom Wilson. We mentioned he's out for a couple of weeks due to that 7-game suspension. That we have, by the way, we've already talked about that at length in our previous episode last week. So again, I won't get into it too much here now. But yeah, I mean, the loss of Wilson was supposed to be a big one for the Caps for that length of time, 7 games, because he has been one of the Caps' most consistent forwards this season. Nicklas Backstrom and TJ Oshie have also been very consistent for the Caps. The ever-reliable Nick Backstrom is actually getting quite a lot of Hart Trophy buzz in the East Division. He's been that good. And Backstrom has also been quite the hot goal scorer this season. He's got 10 already in just 27 games, which would put him on pace for just over 30 goals in a full season, which would be his highest goal total since the 2009-2010 season. So Backstrom obviously much more well known for dishing out assists than he is for scoring goals. He has the most assists of anyone in the entire NHL since he came into the league as a rookie in the 2007-2008 season, with over 700 of them in his illustrious career so far up to this point. So many more to come for him with the Caps as well. Future Hall of Famer, obviously. But yeah, I mean, given that he's much more known for dishing out apples, he and his good buddy Alex Ovechkin were having a pretty good laugh about Backstrom's sudden goal-scoring prowess, with Ovi saying that Backy is the best sniper in the league. But yeah, I mean, with Backstrom, he's just such a ridiculously smart player, right? Like, he can basically do whatever he wants to do out there. If he wants to rack up assists, then he'll rack up assists. If he wants to score goals, he'll score goals. He obviously, he doesn't have that like pure raw power of a guy like Ovechkin. But then, no one else really does. That's just Ovi. But Backstrom, like I said, is so smart. He knows the areas on the ice to go to score goals. And he does have a sneaky good shot as well. Very sneaky release. He has very good wrist and snap shots. He's very accurate with his shots. He picks corners really well. And he also shoots it a lot harder than you would probably expect from a guy who does have so many career assists. So I think that probably surprises goalies a lot of the time as well, because you're kind of looking for him to pass, and then instead he just rips it top cheese, right? So Backstrom, by the way, he will play in his 984th career game for our Caps tonight against Buffalo, which will move him past Calle Johansson for second on the Caps all-time list, behind only line mate Alex Ovechkin. So Backy and Ovi, quite literally walking, skating legends, right? Like, quite literally the two greatest Caps ever. And it's becoming like it's not even close at this point. So I'm so grateful. We are so blessed, seriously. Don't ever take it for granted. That's all I have to say. And Backstrom obviously just signed a new 5-year contract extension with the Caps as well. And now he's having one of his best seasons in years after signing it. Whereas with most guys around the league, like, you would see them sign the big money deal and then they fall off the face of the earth, statistically, right? Production-wise. Not the case at all for Nicklas Backstrom. He just continues to get better and better and better. So a big congratulations to Nick for moving into second place all time in games played for the Caps later tonight. And a big thank you to him for continuing to be both the perfect hockey player and perfect human being for our team and for the DC community. Okay, so I got off track there a little bit talking about Backstrom. I love Nick Backstrom, but now that I'm finished with my love letter to him for today, at least, let's go back to what we were scheduled to talk about, which is Ovechkin and Vrana. They're heating up. So in the 4 games that Tom Wilson has sat out so far due to that suspension, Ovechkin has scored 3 goals in those 4 games, much more in line with what we expect in the goal-scoring department from the grade 8. But honestly, like, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I never worry about Ovi's goal scoring. Like, it seems like every season we have the same conversation. He starts kind of slow every season, it seems. Kind of, over the first half, kind of scoring just enough goals at the right times to make sure that his Caps win. And then suddenly, in the second half of every season, when he starts kind of gearing up for the playoffs, that's when he just takes off like a rocket ship, like I said, every season. So I don't worry about him at all. And he has still got 10 goals already, even though he did miss a good chunk of games due to he was obviously put on the NHL's COVID-19 list. So he missed some games there. And we know that he's been playing through an injury as well. So I say again, like, don't worry about him, folks. If he's still not lighting it up in the second half of the season, then you can start to worry. But so far, this really just follows what's been a years-long pattern for Ovechkin. And he's even admitted, by the way, once before that it is kind of by design in order to save some energy for the most important time of the year, that being the playoffs, obviously, as he is in his mid-30s now. I know that can be kind of easy to forget that he's in his mid-30s, given his ridiculous production at his age. But yeah, like, it's not a bad idea to conserve some energy for the playoffs. It was a strategy that was brainstormed and implemented mutually by Ovechkin, by Caps general manager Brian McClellan, and by former Caps head coach Barry Trotz. And hey, you know, it's worked pretty well so far. The Caps won the Stanley Cup in 2018, and Ovechkin's numbers in the playoffs have remained sky high, despite him being in his mid-30s. So, you know, maybe let's let the people who know what they're doing do what they do, you know? And anyway, so Ovechkin, like I said, he has 3 goals in the last 4 games. And Vrana has 5 goals and 9 points in the last 8 games. Jakub Vrana, like, he is an emerging superstar. He's so good. I'm going to dive into him and his play more in depth in a future episode when we have more time. But yeah, for now, like, just know that Vrana is a fucking god, and we should all bow before him. Also, a few quick notes on, and congratulations for Alex Ovechkin, just before we move on here. So in the Caps' most recent game against Philly, Ovechkin scored his 716th career goal on his 5,638th career shot on goal in the NHL, which was significant for 2 reasons. So number 1, Ovechkin is now within a single goal of catching Phil Esposito for 6th all-time on the NHL's goals list. And number 2, that 5,638th shot of Ovechkin's career moved him past Jaromir Jagr for 2nd all-time on the NHL's shots on goals list. Shots on goal, rather, on the NHL's shots on goal list. So he has done that in 558 fewer games than Jagr did. So Jagr said recently that Ovechkin will break Wayne Gretzky's all-time goals record. Jagr is a believer. And since Ovechkin came into the league in 2005, this is a nutty stat. He has a ridiculous 1,910 more shots on goal than the next closest guy. The next closest guy being Eric Stahl. So he's almost doubled up the next closest guy, people. That is just silly. So anyways, he now trails only Ray Bourque for the most shots on goal of all time in NHL history. So he is just 570 shots behind Ray Bourque, and he is likely to surpass him sometime in the next 2 seasons. Ovechkin's 716th career goal was also his 263rd career power play goal, and he now sits just 2 goals back of Brett Hull for 2nd on the NHL's all-time power play goals list. He is also only 11 goals back of Dave Ondrejchuk, who is 1st on that list. So Ovechkin is likely to become the NHL's all-time power play goals leader at some point next season. And already, the NHL's all-time leader in overtime goals, Ovechkin is currently 4th all-time in-game winning goals of any kind, and he needs just 5 more of those in order to catch Phil Esposito for 3rd all-time, and just 7 more to catch the great Gordie Howe for 2nd all-time. So the point of what I'm saying here is that we are on milestone watch pretty much every single day these days with a guy like Alex Ovechkin. He is quickly climbing the ranks of the NHL's greatest of all time in basically every category. Okay, so Enough about the Caps specifically, even though I know we could all easily talk about them all day long. But I want to try out a new segment here that we're going to be doing from now on. It is called Onside, Offside. And basically, it's where we take different happenings and opinions from around the league. Our listeners can write in. They can tell us something where they want to know if this is onside or offside. It can be things like... it can be like a borderline hit. It can be an act of discipline or non-discipline from the league. It can be comments from players, comments from coaches, comments from general managers. It can be opinions on certain teams or players that are being shared by mainstream media. Whatever, it's whatever you want it to be. So write us with something that you want to know, whether it's onside or offside. You can write us by email at JaneaTalksCaps@gmail.com, or you can write us on any of our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., either by messaging us or by commenting on one of our posts. We're usually going to put up a specific post beforehand asking for questions for onside, offside. So, and then we'll tell you whether we think that this is onside or offside, with onside being that we agree with whatever this is, and with offside being that we do not agree with whatever this is. So you'll get the hang of it, I promise. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so just scrolling through here. So first up, we've got a gentleman named Nick who writes in. He writes, "Hey Janea, I'm from Canada too. I live in Toronto and I am a Maple Leafs fan, but I like the Caps as well. Love Ovechkin and love your podcast. I'm just wondering, as you know, the Canadian media is really loving pumping the tires of my Leafs this season. So I'm just wondering, with so much playoff heartbreak for so many years now, is it safe for me to listen to their tire pumping and to take it seriously? Do you really think that the Leafs are the best team in the North Division?" That's Nick's question. Well, Nick, first of all, thank you for writing in. Thank you for listening to the show and for your kind words regarding our show as well. I can tell already that you have some really good taste because you mentioned that you love Alex Ovechkin. We certainly love Alex Ovechkin as well. But okay, let's talk about your Leafs. So for me, there's a lot of things about the Leafs that are exciting, right? Like they're fun offensively, for one. But there's also a lot of things that are exciting about them in a bad way, namely the total circus that is their defense. And so I get how a lot of Leafs fans up here in Canada can get sucked into this, because you're right, like I have TSN, Sportsnet, whatever. I have it on all the time in the background when I'm working from home. And you are right. The media here is so over the top with it. They wanted the cup awarded to the Leafs 3 weeks into this season. But I urge Leafs fans not to get sucked in too much. Like, don't get your hopes up too much. Because watching as an impartial outsider who has no skin in the game in the North Division, there's really a lot of things that really still bug me about this Leafs team. And I mentioned it already, but the main thing is their defense. It's a lot of the same old problems for them on defense. It really hasn't mattered whether it's Sheldon Keefe or Mike Babcock or anyone else coaching them. And I'm certainly not buying into the Canadian media's hype that this Leafs team is somehow different, because I just watched them lose a game last night to the lowly Ottawa Senators, right? And so it's like, okay, that happens. Even the best teams lose to the shitty teams once in a while. But it wasn't so much the loss as it was the way that the loss happened. It was just way too familiar for me. Like I said, it was the same old things that we've always seen from them. It was a total circus at their own end of the rink. It was turnovers. It was blown defensive coverages. It was at times poor goaltending as well. And it's not like this game against the Senators was just a one-off either. Like, we've seen this from the Leafs time and time again this season. We've seen it from them time and time again, in all of the past several seasons. So just look at their play-in round series versus the Columbus Blue Jackets last season as a perfect example, right? Like, to try to get into the playoffs. Maple Leafs, of course, didn't even make the playoffs last year because of that series against the Blue Jackets. So a lot of the same problems that cost the Leafs that series were really a lot of the same problems that we saw last night versus the Senators. The Senators, who are a far inferior team to that Blue Jackets team as well. So this game against the Senators last night was really just a vintage Toronto Maple Leafs performance when you really think about it. There's a reason why they haven't won a playoff series in almost 20 years. It's not by accident. And so for me, I'm not hating, but it's just that it's definitely a pattern at this point, right? Is all I'm trying to say. Like, these are the same problems that they've always had across, like I said, several different coaching staffs now. You can't blame Mike Babcock anymore. And so until they fix that, until they really fix their defensive problems, which for what it's worth, I don't think that they can even do with the way that they've got their salary cap set up, paying so much money to 4 forwards. They're so top heavy. It's a very poor salary cap structure, if you ask me. Assuming, of course, that you're trying to win Stanley Cups rather than President's Trophies. But yeah, like, until they fix that, it's a no for me, dog. Like, it's offside. To me, they're not the best team in the North Division, not if we're talking playoff hockey, which is what really counts here, right? So they might be the best team in the North Division through the regular season, because the way that they played the game is very conducive to regular season success. But come playoff time, like, give me the Jets, give me the Habs. And that's another thing as well. Like, give me Connor Hellebuck or Carey Price, man, not Frederik Andersen. Nothing against Freddie at all, but like, he hasn't been very good at key times in the playoffs. And nor has Austin Matthews, for that matter. Like, it's great that he might win a Rocket Richard trophy, racking up, freebie goals against the Senators and the Canucks all season long, in a pandemic season. But like, those teams aren't going to be around in the playoffs for you to score against them, right? So for me, until Matthews does anything at all in the playoffs that's worth mentioning, then that's going to be a question mark as well. He's less than a point per game in the playoffs, and he's a -4. So you aren't going to win anything if those are the types of numbers that your so-called best player is putting up. And he's got to figure it out. Like, shit gets tougher in the playoffs, right? Matchups are tougher. The goaltending is tougher. Coaches are taking the extra care to match lines, something a lot of them don't do during the regular season. So you're out there against tougher competition on a lot of your shifts. So sure, like, you still get the last change at home, but in the playoffs, you can't be your team's best player and go scoreless in all of the road games just because the competition you're facing is tougher, right? So he's got to figure it out. They aren't going to win anything if he doesn't. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, Nick, for me, this high-flying opinion of the Leafs from the Canadian media is offside for the time being. For your sake, I hope they prove me wrong. But until they do, it's an offside for me. Okay, a couple of other quick ones. Let's see. So Jill writes in with another Canadian media question. She writes, Janaea, onside or offside? The Canadian media says that the Battle of Alberta is a better rivalry than Caps versus Penguins. Oh, Jill. We know the answer to this, don't we? Like, that is like 30 fucking feet offside. And more than that, that's an intentional offside where the faceoff is coming all the way back down to the other end. Honestly, like, where do they get this garbage? Like, where do they get off spouting this type of nonsense, basically? Hey, TSN, call me when either of those teams does jack shit in the playoffs. Until then, I don't want to hear this nonsense. Caps and Penguins, obviously, they've combined to win 3 of the last 5 Stanley Cups. That is what makes a rivalry playoff success. I don't even need to get into the fact that Alex Ovechkin versus Sidney Crosby is one of the greatest individual rivalries that sports has ever seen. They're both the 2 most dominant players of their generation, and they've been playing head-to-head in the same division for a lot of those years with a lot of playoff matchups. So sure, like, Edmonton has Connor McDavid, but who does Calgary have? Please. It's no comparison. This one is way offside for me. Jill. But thank you very much for writing in. Hope to hear from you again as well. And finally, we've got another one from Luke writes in. This is a good one. He asks, Janaea, onside or offside? The Ottawa Senators are the worst team in the NHL. Well, it certainly seems like we have maybe a lot of Canadians tuning into our podcast, which I love. Obviously, I'm Canadian. I live in Vancouver. So yeah, I love that. I just wanted to mention that. Shout out to Canada. But Luke, I'm going to say that is offside for the simple reason that the Buffalo Sabres exist. And now, as I say this, I realize that I'm probably putting a massive jinx out into the universe. I'm sure this means that the Sabres will totally whip the Caps' asses tonight to break their 10-game losing streak, all just because I said this. But to me, the Sabres are just so pathetic to watch, man. Like it's like they don't even care at all out there. They just seem like they stopped trying weeks ago. Like they're just not putting any effort in at all out there. Like they just don't give two fucks. And on the contrary, I have watched quite a few games that the Senators have played this season, kind of just out of curiosity, you know, like if they're playing the Leafs or the Habs or someone like that, I'll turn it on if I'm not doing anything. And last night's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs for one, like I watched that one, and the Senators, they play with a lot of heart. I know that their goal differential is abysmal. I know that they're in last place in the weakest division. I know all of that. I realize all of that. But they play with heart, man. And that's something like, when you look at the Sabres, it's just like, I mean, and for the Senators too, like they've had a lot of goaltending issues. Matt Murray, who we're very familiar with as Caps fans, he's been absolutely horrendous for the Senators. That's looking to be an ugly contract at this point. So that certainly contributes a lot to the goal differential statistic as well, when your goaltender can't stop a fucking beach ball, right? But I like the way that they compete. They've got a lot of young guys. They're in a full-blown rebuild, obviously we know that, so the losses are kind of to be expected to a point, but they play hard. They've played the top teams in that North Division very hard, and they've actually earned more than half of their 10 wins this season against those top teams, so I like the Sens. I think they're doing their best, and as a fan, I think that's all you can really ask at this point when you have started a rebuild. They've got some great pieces to build around too, like I love Brady Tkachuk up front. And Tim Stützle, he's amazing. Drake Batherson has been really, really good. Thomas Chabot is a beast on the back end. So they're well set up for future years, and I think that the compete level that they're playing with right now should be really encouraging to fans, because it's implanting the right habits into the psyches of these young guys, right? That's very important. Like, that cannot be overlooked. And that's a great job by the coaching staff there in Ottawa. The opposite is true in Buffalo, where all of these guys just seem so mentally fragile at this point. And it's kind of like, you know, their rebuild started like how long ago at this point? Like, they've just been in a rebuild seemingly forever. So I get it. Like, I get that Jack Eichel and all of these guys are frustrated. But yeah, like they've won 6 games this season. Yes, they're in the toughest division. I get that. But at the same time, you watch this team and it's just like they just have no pride whatsoever, man. Like, they really are pathetic, truly. So obviously we know that they've lost 10 straight. I think their top line of Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall, and Jeff Skinner has a combined like 5 goals or something on the season, which is pathetic in and of itself. And really, like I said, when you watch them on a nightly basis, it's just really evident that none of them even want to be there. They're all checked out, which I find sad. You know, like, I think that that's a shitty thing when you're a professional athlete. You are paid to compete. And I know that losing's hard and everyone hates it. Like I said, I get that part of it. I get that they're frustrated. But still, man, like, you're paid handsomely to give a crap, right? Like, kind of goes with the territory. So for me, that's offside, man. Like, the Sens are not the worst team in the league. It's the Sabres for me by a country mile, just because of the way that they don't seem to give even the slightest of fucks out there. And I do feel really bad for Sabres fans, because Buffalo has great fans, and they've been in a rebuild, like I said, for like the last 50 years, it seems, in that Sabres organization. So it's got to be really, really tough as a fan, and I do feel for them. Anyways, that wraps up the new Onside, Offside segment for today. And it also wraps up our podcast for today. You can send us your questions for next week's Onside Offside segment. Like I said, you can send them by email to JanaeTalksCaps@gmail.com, or you can send them to us via any of our social media channels. We would love to hear from you guys. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions for today's episode. Great questions, and as you've heard, your Onside Offside questions can be about anything, right? Like, they don't have to be just solely about the Caps. I love the questions coming in today. Like I said, it was kind of a Canadian theme, so I love that. So thank you guys again for sending those in. And anyways, babes, like I said, that's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. We are available, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Podcast Addict. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you would get your podcasts from, we are on there. So subscribe, share us with your family and your friends and your fellow Caps fans, your fellow hockey fans in general, and we'll do this all again next week. As always, I'm looking so forward to it. Love chatting with you guys. And until next time, babes, stay classy, stay healthy, stay safe, and let's go Caps. Let's get another W in Buffalo tonight.